We are so excited to have him and grateful for his time his time and willingness to share some ideas and insights with us. So if you'll please join me in welcoming Max to our seminar.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I spent a lot of time in this building many years ago, getting an undergraduate degree in Spanish and then the teaching certificate. Later, as I worked on a master's degree in Spanish teaching, I gravitated towards instructional science, which is what the department was called back then. And just a little background, when I got to BYU, Dave Merrill was leaving BYU and going to USC. But at that time, I became familiar with his work and used his work for my master's project, which was an orientation program for the family history department. And I did some research and determined that the orientation program did make a difference. But I've kind of followed Dave Merrill's work ever since. I taught his component display theory, which he developed back in the early 80s, and kind of followed along with his component design theory. And then apparently at ACT, and I missed out on this because I've been out in the work world most of the time, apparently there was a Cold War between the cognitivists and the constructivists that lasted about 10 years. And this was, there were some very hard feelings between Merrill and Jonathan and Schenck and others, and I'm not totally sure exactly who all was involved. But towards the end of that Cold War, Laurie Nelson, who at one point I believe taught here, talked with Merrill about co-teaching a class. I believe it was up at USU. And so they co-taught a class and kind of merged the cognitivism with the constructivism. And I think it was out of that Merrill came up with his real world whole tasks. And so at the center of Merrill's First Principles of Instruction, which he first authored in 2002, was real world whole tasks. So why is it so important to use real world whole tasks in our instruction? Have you thought about that? Anybody with an idea why that's so important?
Can you define what you mean by whole?
Okay, these are significant, comprehensive, robust tasks or scenarios. Yes.
So task-based learning. Task-based learning is obviously an approach that we can take to learning, and if you have task-based learning, you can kind of know, can you apply what you've learned? It's not necessarily just do you know things, but can you apply them to a real task?
Right, and the key is that you can apply them, what you said is so significant, because you can apply them to the real significant tasks. Now, if you teach anything less than that, the learner may not be able to apply their knowledge and skills and competencies to the comprehensive tasks, scenarios, situations, problems that they need to deal with. Now, most instruction falls very short of helping people prepare to do the real world whole tasks. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and it's actually a little harder, but not that much harder, to turn instruction that's at the lower level into task-centered with meaningful real-world tasks. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. So a few weeks ago, Joanna Bentley and I have been teaching workshops on how to apply first principles of instruction for about the last 10 years. But a few weeks ago at ACT in Las Vegas, we invited Dave Merrill to join us, and he did. He drove down from St. George. He got there a little bit late. We started our workshop. He comes in with a walker. He's 82 years old, and he comes in with a walker, has some heart problems, but he was as sharp as could be. And he helped with the workshop, and part of his presentation was on how to analyze syllabi, and we'll make that link available to you, because he came up with a way to analyze syllabi with a simple rubric. Not that the process was simple, but the rubric was simple. And he had analyzed some 165 syllabi for the American University of Nigeria, who apparently have some very preeminent faculty there. So we'll make that link available to you. But the important thing is how do you take instruction that is lower level and take it up to task-centered? And so anyway, after I got my master's degree, I worked at the Family History Department for 12 years. I authored a booklet on how to do family history, a member's guide to family history and temple work that was printed in more than 2 million copies. And I hope that made a difference. It's been rewritten and republished with that information. Then I worked at New Skin in the Human Resource Department, assistant director there. Hopefully I made a difference there. I worked at Novell. One of the projects that I worked on was an online database of all the technical support information for directory services. And they took that program on the road and did workshops and made $1 million about the same time they laid me off, for their quarterly, so they could make their quarterly earnings or whatever. So I didn't see any of that money, but since then I did some work for a company called Test Out, developing CSE certification training. I did some work for Hewlett Packard, and it was an online orientation program for order coordinators with multiple legacy computer systems and very complex orders. Totally non-intuitive. And did a week's worth of training for them. And we had simulations. We had simulated computer systems. And so as we provided demonstrations, the learners, the new order coordinators had computers and they were entering these practice orders as we showed them how to do those. And that turned out very well. We won a national NSPI, ISBI training award for that program. Since then, I've been consulting and other work. I worked for Galton Technologies and Prometric, teaching clients how to develop reliable and valid certification tests. I worked with various clients across the U.S. and Canada on how to create good test items. And later I did work after I got my doctorate, I went back to USU and got a doctorate. I had been teaching comprehensive models for instruction. I realized they probably weren't comprehensive. So I went back for a doctorate at USU. Heather, yeah, I'll go to USU. Anyway, I still cheer for BYU though, so given a choice. My son knows that, although he graduated. Anyway, he cheers for USU, that's all right. Anyway, so to make a long story short, I went back for a doctorate degree, studied there under Dave Merrill, Andy Gibbons, Laurie Nelson, Dave Wiley, Joanne Bentley, and others. And for my dissertation, I evaluated a rubric Merrill had made based on first principles, evaluated 10 online courses, and of those 10 online courses, Merrill was our baseline rater. He gave 0 points out of 100 points possible to a few of these online courses. He was not very fond of survey courses. And we gave higher ratings than Dave, but he was the baseline rater, so how do you argue with him? But we compared his rubric to some other rubrics, and we're able to provide some limited evidence, preliminary evidence, again, that his rubric was less than some of the other standard online course evaluation rubrics. And we also provided some correlation that high ratings on Merrill's rubric correlated with student ratings of courses. And so Frick and others from the University of Indiana have provided evidence that there is some validity in student ratings. So that was kind of interesting. Anyway, since that time I did some work I went back to Washington, D.C. area, worked in Virginia for the Department of Transportation. There, commercial motor vehicle division. So they needed a testing director that could help develop the tests and also could do the statistical analysis of the test items. And they had 24 pairs of tests. Most of these were certification tests that highway patrol officers would have to take, and if they didn't pass them, they could lose their job. And we were able to increase the percent of valid test items by about 40%. I should be more precise with my statistics, but anyway, but dramatically, so that's pretty scary to think that before they were certifying officers with, you know, kind of unreliable and invalid tests, or partially. So I worked there. I also worked for the Department of Defense and coordinated coordinated the curriculum for an executive leadership development program for the Office of the Secretary of Defense. It was for a program for mid-level civilians from all departments of the military. And they had cohorts of 64 each year. And we developed task and activity-centered instruction. And it was very intense. It was very effective. So I also did some other work for the department, for the National Institute of Health, for the Department of the Interior, and some other things. But as work slowed down, we ended up coming back to Utah. I've done some work for USAA, and currently I work for Morgan Stanley, an investment firm. But very typically, one of the things that you always have to remember is you have to care about what the customer wants as well as what they need. And usually what they want will trump what they need. But you try to educate them on what they need, and currently I'll be developing an evaluation for wealth advisor associates who help financial advisors use some of the latest technology and the latest methods for helping basically wealthy clients and bringing in wealthy clients. So that will be performance-based, whereas yesterday I was working on job aids that were not good. Which one of the problems that we deal with is a lot of the instruction is bad, you know, even here at the university, you know, out in industry, out in government and military. So my effort is to help improve that. So that's a little background. See if we can bring this back to life. But Dave Merrill has been developing instructional design theories for his whole career. And he had gone to a presentation that B.F. Skinner gave, and somebody asked Skinner, says, well, there's a discrepancy in what you said, and he says, well, do you think I believe everything I ever wrote? And this is Skinner. And then he said, all I tried to do is take a few assumptions and then make as many extrapolations for those assumptions as I can. And you know, he came up, of course, with behaviorism, his behaviorism approach. So all that being said, let's talk a little bit more about five-star instruction. And how to apply first principles of instruction. So we'll give it a little introduction. We'll give it a demo, and then we'll give you an opportunity, hopefully, to we need to design a sample course together, and then we'll give you a chance to do a course design, all right, based on first principles. So Merrill used to call his rubric five-star rubric, and then he later moved that on to E3, E cubed. And basically what he was saying is instruction should be efficient, effective, and engaging. So And he said the way to do that, the problem is most instruction is still information only. And Merrill says information by itself has no value, and I'm not sure I totally agree with that. But obviously, if we can know how to apply the information, that's more important. And then something that I've observed is that media and technology have historically and currently, they obscure, they eclipse, they replace, they hide, whatever the word is. It's very easy for people to say, oh, I'm using this media. Well, what's your instructional strategy? And many of the presentations at AECT talked about the importance of the instructional strategy, but very few, with the exception that Heather and Charles did, talked about what the factors of those instructional strategy are. And so, so the danger that you will always deal with is people think that when you take something online, a course online or instruction online, that it's going to solve a problem. And very often the online instruction can be worse than the face-to-face instruction, because you may remove all of the lecture, you may remove all of the demonstration. And good application is really hard online. You have to think hard about, okay, how am I going to do this application? So the solution then is first principles of instruction. And the key to first principles of instruction, it doesn't really eliminate other aspects of good instruction, but it puts real-world significant whole tasks, robust tasks, whatever you want to call them, puts them in the middle. And then it adds some kind of activation. So activation is finding out what the learner already knows, or what they don't know, or what they know that's wrong, and also providing a framework for, or a schema, or a skeleton, or a construct for what they're going to learn. Then then we provide demonstration of the real world, of a real world whole task or a whole scenario. Or in the military, they talk about experiential learning, whatever you want to call it. But it needs to be the experiences that are significant, and they need to be able to know and do. Then we provide application. So they apply a real-world whole task or various versions of a real-world whole task. And then you encourage or provide integration so that they integrate what they're learning back into the real world. So I'm going to ask a question I think is critical. So where does constructivism fit in this model? Pure constructivism. Okay, go ahead.
I guess maybe within the application, because that's when they're doing the thing to construct the knowledge.
Absolutely, in the application. And what else?
I'd say in the activation as well, where they're making the structures or whatever.
Okay. All right, they're making these, but they're doing it by themselves, right? So a lot of times we assume that the instructor is doing this, but in this case, who's doing it? Yeah, it's the students. But what's the real key of the real benefit of constructivism? What are they dealing with? Hopefully, number one, with real world tasks, right? With real world scenarios, yes.
I was just going to say,
Microphone.
this is
Hand
bringing
him a
back
microphone.
a memory from ACT. This was ages ago. When did this come out? Like 2002 or 2003?
Yeah,
or
first
something
principles,
like that?
2002.
So this would have been right as I was graduating or soon, my first year here as a faculty member, so ages ago, like almost 2 decades ago. But I was at ACT when Merrill presented this for the first time. And David Jonathan was in the room. And David Jonathan is a big, he's passed away now, but in the field he was a kind of big proponent of constructivism. And Dave Merrill's has historically been not necessarily in that camp. And when he presented this, Dave Jonathan stood up and said, Dave Merrill, Dave, I'm glad to see that you finally come over to the constructivist side. So certainly Dave Jonathan saw some elements of constructivism in the first principles.
So I've never thought of it this way, but the question is, who is providing the activation? Who is providing the demonstration? Who's providing the task? Who's providing the application? Who's providing the integration? So if the learner is providing all of it, it's constructivism, right? But if the instructor, quote, is providing some of this or most of it, then it's, I guess, cognitivism on steroids. I'm not sure what you say. But that's great, because Merrill Reigeluth has written some books on instructional models, and Merrill says there's only one model, Charlie. And ultimately, all of the models probably fit somewhere, somewhere in here, and this was Merrill's attempt. So, so what we're going to do today, I think we'll have time. We're going to have you design a course based on this template. Okay, so do you all have a course you can design? Anybody not have a course that they could work on? Okay, that's good. I just assumed everybody had this experience. So you can design a course using this template. And so this is an example that I'm going to show you in just a minute. But part of my work I did actually with the Veterans Administration, and they were developing an authoring tool. Anyway, why develop your own authoring tool? So back in those days, most of the authoring tools did not have text entry where you could have the learner type in their responses. And so they created this proprietary authoring tool for the Veterans Administration with a company called CTC. And I provided the instructional design framework and coaching so they could integrate first principles of instruction into overall design and to the recommended templates. And so the course that I developed, we had some existing assets, and I developed a course based on first principles for helping treat patients with tinnitus. Now, tinnitus is a severe condition that military veterans and others get where they have a consistent ringing in their ears. It doesn't go away. They may not be able to sleep. They may have emotional challenges. And so I took this course, and so the task of this course, or the problem, is to treat a patient with tinnitus. And so this course was actually for medical doctors and those that would provide support for patients with tinnitus. So the activation, the patient's name was Sam. So the activation was to show a video of Sam talking with his doctor and telling the doctor, hey doctor, I have this problem, I won't go away, I can't sleep, etc. And so that's our activation. Then, for demonstration, we walk Sam and the doctor, and we have various videos. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the course, but which is typical. So we walk through the whole process of the doctors and the audiologists and the coaches and the psychologists working with Sam, and we show him how it's done, all right? How to treat this patient. Then we go to application, and we have patients, participants, not patients. Participants, in this case the participants are doctors, we have them practice with scenarios. And then the integration is that they actually provide treatment for patients. So this is a high-level course design, all right? And so what you'll be doing in just a few minutes is your own. I'll show you how we did this and we'll have you do your own. Now I mentioned that there are a lot of levels of instructional design, all right? And this is an illustration that I came up with to represent Merrill's levels of instructional design. You'll notice that level 0 is presentation only. Merrill says information has no value. And I'm not sure that's totally true, but without these other levels it doesn't provide much. So by adding demonstration alone, he says you increase the effectiveness and the efficiency of your instruction. When you add application, you add some more value, yes.
Can you briefly explain the difference between presentation and demonstration?
Yes. So presentation would be just giving them a lot of information. These are all the laws, regulations. This is the supplementary information. Here's the reference information. Here are all the categories of animals, insects, whatever. So just a lot of information, okay? And so typically a survey course, an overview of whatever, psychology, history, is just a lot of information, all right? And Merrill says it has little or no value. So that being said, I don't always agree with it, but most of the time it's hard not to agree. But it's when you can apply that knowledge and that information to something significant, I think that's when you get your value. And case in point, for a biology class at the University of Hawaii, he helped the instructor come up with some real-world scenarios where biology was involved and had students come up with solutions to these real-world biological problems. Could have been pollution, ecological problems, whatever. They have worked on real-world cases. So that's a good question, because the next level, level 3, is task-centered. So how do you come up with a real-world task? And Merrill said he'd asked professors 5 times, well, why do you teach this? So why is that? And he'd ask why multiple times, and they said, well, we want people to be able to do such and such in the real world. And so that helped them get to the real-world tasks. And then activation and integration. Can't always do the integration, but if you can provide some activation, that can really help, because that helps the learner shift their paradigm or get into the instruction. So I'm going to walk you through this Veterans Administration course and how we did the design, and then we'll have you design your own courses. So again, as I showed you before, the problem was treating that patient with tinnitus, real patients with tinnitus. Activation, we had the video of him, the patient meeting with the doctor. Demonstration, we walked through the whole treatment. Now this is all online, and we'll show some of the slides in a minute. Application is you have other scenarios, or SAM scenario and other scenarios, and you identify how to treat the patients, and then the doctors provide treatment for their patients. So this, yes.
For that last step of doctors providing treatment for their patients, is that part of the course, or is that kind of just an assumption that they'll be able to apply the principles?
That's a good question. Sometimes you don't have control. In the Veterans Administration, there might be a control, and there might be some monitoring and ongoing, in-service training or whatever for doctors. I don't know. But sometimes you can't control the integration. But hopefully, one of the models that I created years back when I was at Nobel, I called the events of learning. It's kind of similar to the event of Gagne's events of instruction. And one of the phases or elements that I put into the events of learning is that the learners plan performance. So after they've gone through the instruction, then they plan performance and how they're going to apply it. So sometimes you can't control the integration, but if you can have the learner plan how they're going to apply it in the real world, that can be really helpful. So this diagram, the blue boxes here represent that the instructor is providing demonstration of all of these component tasks, okay? And then the brown boxes represent that the learner is practicing all of those component tasks. So this is the first real-world whole problem and all the components of it. You demonstrate and have application. Now, one of the things, oh, never mind. Sometimes the tasks are complex enough, or there are variations of the task, that you won't need to provide another scenario or task. And this task may have a couple of new components that you need to demonstrate, and then they can apply again all of the components, including the new components. Then you may need another scenario that's another variation. And again, you may need to demonstrate a few of the new components and provide application. And then you do that until the learners are able to perform complete tasks without assistance. So what I forgot to say is a lot of times there is explanation. And I like to marry the explanation with the demonstration, so that when you're demonstrating how to do a task, if there's something the learner needs to know in addition, I like to integrate that, so that's part of the demonstration. And that has been very successful for me over the years. So, how many of you have done hierarchical task analysis? Any of you? Okay, a couple. Okay, so how many of you have done a task analysis or a content analysis? All right. So the important thing when you have a real-world task, I like doing it this way because you can do it with sticky notes, like on a whiteboard or whatever, on winter paper. It's really critical to identify all of the competencies, knowledge and skills. Some people call this a knowledge and skills analysis. Some people call it a content analysis. I think it's important to do it in terms of competencies. But if you can identify the major competencies and all of the major subcompetencies and sub-subcompetencies, then you've got your whole course identified, all the major pieces. Then at some point, maybe they already know some of these things. You can kind of draw a line and say, okay, they're bringing in with previous knowledge, they're already above this level. So these are the 5 phases, or 5 levels for tinnitus treatment. So the first one is diagnose the condition, and begin prescription and justify referring to an audiologist if you're going to forward it to an audiologist. Level 2, you do further diagnosis, justify hearing aids, group education, and mental health specialists. And so these are different phases that doctors would go through. Level 3, justify interdisciplinary evaluation and therapy with a psychologist. So if the group therapy and the hearing aids aren't helping, then maybe we also send them to a psychologist. And then you can have further therapy with audiologist and psychologist, and then maybe even have ongoing treatment. So these are the different phases that we go through as we treat Sam. So for our instructional design, having in mind these component tasks, this is the overall instructional design for the course, all right? So these are the levels of progressive tinnitus management. We've got level 1, preliminary diagnosis, level 2, the audiologist, level 3, group education, level 4, evaluation, level 5, individualized support. So with our first scenario, or our first real task, we have the SAM scenario. We're going to provide demonstration and application through all 5 of these. For our next scenario, we're going to ask the learner to say, should we have done something different? Was there a problem with our treatment that we provided the first time through? And maybe we should have given SAM combination instruments that combine hearing aids and some kind of therapeutic noise that helps them to deal with the tinnitus. So maybe we should have prescribed that sooner. Then we have another scenario, Lori, who has minor tinnitus. That scenario is all application. And then we have another scenario, Deborah, that's all application. So this right here is our basically our complete course design at a high level. Then here are a few screens. This screen here is a tinnitus and hearing survey, and we can ask them some questions, kind of help with our diagnosis based on how Sam filled out the survey. He says, yeah, tinnitus is a big problem. Hearing is a pretty big problem. Sound tolerance, not a big issue. So we begin to get part of the diagnosis of this situation. We have a knowledge check. And then here's the first question. He's met with the primary care physician. What should the primary care physician do? And they have to enter a response. So any recommendations? What would you have the primary care physician do? Yeah, refer them to an audiologist for hearing tests so you get some more accurate information. Exactly. So you'd enter that information in, and we see a video of him getting referred to audiology. So this one, we're kind of jumping to the next level. Let's assume we took Sam through the whole process, and now they've asked us, should we have done something different? In this case, we say, yeah, let's prescribe combination instruments because of the severity of the tinnitus and the hearing loss. Maybe we need to do those, and then we have an expert response. So the learner typed in their response, and then they compare their response to the expert response. And doctors are very competitive, so they want to get the right response. So then we go to a different scenario. This is Lori, and she has minor ringing in her ear. She's not certain. She has some hearing loss, so what should we do? Here we have kind of multiple choice. What should we do here? Yeah. Right, refer to the audiologist. Find out, what the problem is. So, now we have another situation here. Lori has a worse situation. The audiologist was able to determine the amount of hearing loss. She completes the survey, got the hearing test, and so what should we do here? We might jump to the combination instruments. I can't remember the answer, so. Oh, and here's Deborah. All right, so how fast can you design a course? So this is called rapid prototyping. Have you heard of that? So go ahead and quickly take 5 minutes and design a course. Most importantly, identify the real-world task. If you can, design a whole course. And raise your hand if you have a question. So I'm going to go back to the slide that has the tinnitus design. You can kind of see it. Okay, you can do it on paper on your computer. Okay, don't stop working. Does anybody want to share their design, their rapid prototyping design? Don't all speak at once. Who has a design you feel pretty comfortable with? Well, you don't have to totally. Okay, so what's your design?
So mine is,
Microphone.
mine would be help students determine, mine is determine a break-even analysis for a fast food chain restaurant. So I teach
Wow.
business students.
Wow.
And so my activation would be maybe kind of showing a video of like operations, and through that they're identifying fixed and variable costs. So it'd be
Yeah.
assuming they knew what they know about fixed and variable. Then my demonstration would be go through the calculation of that analysis with what the fixed and variable costs are. And the application would be using McDonald's actual financial statements to get those numbers to perform the calculation.
Yeah.
And then I'd have them apply it to either a business they want to start or another comparable company to compare to.
Very impressive. So Merrill actually did a study with NETG, National Education Training Group, where they actually did that to help teach people Excel skills. And they showed very significant results over the traditional instruction. So very cool. So go and do, right? So most of the, if you can identify the task, then everything else will fall into place. So good luck with your course designs. Feel free to, I'll provide my contact information. Feel free to contact me or send me course designs if you want me to review them. But this will help you take what you already know and the incredible expertise that you have, you know, with your faculty here and all of their knowledge and experience. And then if they haven't added the real-world tasks already, then you can just integrate those and come up with great instruction. Okay, well, thank you.